עולה בצבעים בהירים. תמונה של עתיד מבטיח לטובת אלבניה ולטובת מדינת ישראל. ראש הממשלה רמה, אדי חברי היקר, אני מברך במלוא החום וההוקרה אותך, את רעייתך, את המשלחת שנלווית אליך. ברוך בואכם, חברים יקרים, לירושלים. ברוך בואכם למדינת ישראל שמחבקת אתכם אל ליבה. תודה רבה לכם.
תודה לראש הממשלה, ואני מתכבד כעת להזמין את ראש האופוזיציה, חבר הכנסת יאיר לפיד, לשאת דברים. בבקשה.
אני חושב שזו התנכלות של הממשלה אליי שמביאים מנהיגים כל כך גבוהים. לפני כל דבר אחר אני מצטרף לדברי יושב ראש הכנסת וראש הממשלה לגבי הגיבור שלנו, רן גבילי, זכרו לברכה. ברוך פודה ומשיב, ואנחנו שולחים מפה למשפחתו חיבוק גדול בשם כל חלקי הבית. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, distinguished guests. The Speaker has mentioned that in Albanian there is an expression that every Albanian child knows, Besa. Besa means to keep your promise, or to be a person who can be counted upon. We, the Jewish people, know that this concept carries a deep meaning to it. The question of whether Albanians could be trusted was tested in our darkest hour, and they kept their promise. At the beginning of the Second World War, Albania was occupied by the Italians, and in 1943 the German army, the Nazis, entered and occupied Albania. As in every other country they occupied, the first thing the Germans did was to demand lists of the Jews living there. This was a standard procedure throughout Europe, and they never encountered real resistance. Mr. Prime Minister, the Nazis placed my father in the Budapest ghetto, and the Hungarians helped. And my grandfather was murdered in Mauthausen concentration camp, and the Austrians helped. And my great-grandmother perished in Auschwitz, and Polish policemen helped capture prisoners who tried to escape. Only the Albanians said no. After almost all of Europe has surrendered, the extermination camps were already built, the Albanians said, we will protect the Jews because we know how to distinguish good from evil. We know how human morality, what human morality is. We have Besa. We owe you, Mr. Prime Minister, a debt of honor, and we will never forget it. This lesson of what moral commitment looks like when the world is falling apart returns to us today as the international order we have known for the past 80 years is unraveling almost at once. At the end of the Second World War, when the world was exposed to the horrors of the Holocaust, a new global order was created. Institutions like the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, the World Health Organization, the International Monetary Fund were established. International conventions were signed and international laws were created with one goal: to build a new, more just world in which individuals and nations would be committed to preventing such atrocities. It was a new human experiment. Not perfect, not always stable or consistent, but it was the first time in history that most of humanity said to itself, never again. That global order is now collapsing before our eyes. At Davos last week, world leaders made clear again and again in different ways the same thing. The rules that have governed the world since the Second World War no longer exist. International institutions led by the United Nations have ceased to function. And Israel knows this better than anyone. The UN's treatment of Israel is the diplomatic equivalent of a psychotic episode. Israel makes up 0.1% of the world's population, yet accounts for more than 60% of UN condemnation resolutions over the past decade. In 2023, the year of Hamas's October 7th attack against Israel, after Israeli babies were burned alive, women were raped, peaceful civilians were killed, the UN General Assembly passed 15 resolutions against Israel, compared to only 8 against the rest of the world combined. This was not an exceptional year. Over the past 10 years, the General Assembly passed 187 resolutions against Israel and only 86 against the entire rest of the world. During this decade, far more people were killed in each of the wars, in Syria, in Yemen, in Ethiopia, in Myanmar, and then in the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, yes, including the current war in Gaza. Yet the UN continued to vote obsessively against Israel. As the Prime Minister just mentioned, Iran has just committed one of the worst massacres of a state against its own civilians in modern history. We don't yet know the full extent of the killing. The numbers keeps increasing. The photos and images are horrifying. Yet the silence is deafening. Mr. Prime Minister, you and I both know that the UN will still condemn Israel more times than Iran this year as well. Or to be precise, they will again condemn the Jews. Under these circumstances, there is no point pretending that global justice still exists. Democratic states have understood that there is no sense in obeying rules when others ignore them with contempt. But this places us before what seems like an impossible dilemma. If there are no rules in the world, how are we supposed to act in order to protect and strengthen our national interests? The answer is simple. If there are no rules and no order, the only thing we have left is our values. In many ways, the answer to this new era is the Albanian model. In 1943, the world told Albania, there are no rules anymore. If you want to survive, you must surrender. And the Albanians answered, maybe there are no rules left, but we have our values. We believe in the sanctity of life. We believe that you cannot just murder innocent people. We believe in friendship. This is what must happen in the new world we are living in. The collapse of the rules should not lead to chaos, but rather to the creation of new partnerships with nations and people who share our values. We must be realistic. We must recognize that every country has its own interests. We must recognize the need to be strong and able to protect ourselves. Israel has always said that we will defend ourselves by ourselves, and that will never change. But the best way to advance those interests is not by isolating ourselves, but by extending a hand to countries with whom we share common values. In the face of changes in globalization and in the rules of global economy, if we want to build a strong local economy, then instead of global trade agreements, we must find partners with whom we can build economic ties. If we want to confront dangerous actors like Iran and prevent them from achieving regional hegemony, we must build regional security partnerships with those who oppose religious fanaticism and, like us, understand the dangers of radical Islam. And if we want to ensure the Jews around the world are protected, we must enlist governments and states that are willing to fight anti-Semitism and defend the Jewish communities living within their borders. Small, agile, unilateral agreements are the future of international cooperation. When I served as Prime Minister, we met back then. We formed the Negev Forum and the I2U2 initiative, models of international cooperation outside of the old global order. We saw what was coming and started to build the foundations. Instead of hoping that institutions like the United Nations, which has gone bankrupt, will fix the world, we must know how to build smaller, more agile partnerships directly connected to the challenges that concerns us. We must decide whom we trust and work with them efficiently and confidently. Such a partnership exists between us and Albania. We can deepen it, expand it, and make it serve not only the interests of our two countries, but also our shared values and our shared belief in the human spirit in a relationship founded on Bessa. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
And now, as they elevate the podium for you, Prime Minister, חברות וחברי הכנסת, אני מתכבד להזמין את ראש ממשלת אלבניה, מר אדי רמה, לשאת דברים.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm not entirely certain that I'm truly standing on the very floor beneath my feet, the same floor from which the most honored guests of this state have addressed this House. And although modesty has never been my most reliable virtue, I confess that I struggle to believe that I deserve such an immense distinction. But I am quite sure that Albania, which I represent with pride, and the people of my nation, who stood, as few others did, for the Jewish people, truly deserve every respect from the State of Israel. And so did the highly distinguished Presidential Medal of Honor that His Excellency President Herzog, a noble and faithful friend of Albania, bestowed on me. Peace and the mercy of God Almighty be upon you, and may peace be for us all, God willing. These were the words with which a human lighthouse of courage and reconciliation, a leader whose life and death were shaped by the relentless pursuit of peace, President Anwar Sadat of Egypt, may his memory be blessed, opened his historic address to the Knesset from this very place. He continued, peace for us all, on Arab land and in Israel as well, and in every part of this vast world, so burdened by bloody conflicts, torn by sharp contradictions, and threatened again and again by destructive wars launched by man to annihilate his fellow man. For amid the ruins of what humanity has built and the remains of its victims, there emerges neither victor nor vanquished. The only vanquished is man, God's most sublime creation. Words spoken under this roof, drawn from the heart of a general raised in wars who, after waging his own, stunned the world by leading his country toward a peace agreement with Israel. Nearly half a century later, they resonate with the same force and the same urgency as when they were first pronounced. Honorable Mr. Speaker, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Lapid, ladies and gentlemen of the Knesset, I could not find better words with which to begin my own address and to steady my breath against the very real emotion I knew I would feel in this very special place. And if Mossad had not yet informed you, I can inform you that my knees are trembling. And there is another reason my knees are trembling. I knew it. To be fully sincere with you, I also knew that speaking here would feel like a speech delivery exam, having to deliver it in front of one of the top 5 speakers in the world, at least in my own chart, Prime Minister Netanyahu. I'll do my best, dear Bibi, to survive your judgment, fully aware that I am merely the second speaker worldwide after Trump, whom you simply cannot avoid listening to. Allow me now, with a possibly calmer breath, to extend to the Speaker of this House my highest appreciation for his meaningful words, to the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, my deepest respect and my most heartfelt thanks for the generous words they shared about Albania and about myself, and to this House, my very profound gratitude for welcoming me here today. Thank you all. I can't be more grateful. And returning to my speech and to my choice to introduce myself through the words of a great Arab leader, allow me to add something personal, because I have learned that among Jews, everything becomes personal, and rather quickly. I'm not Muslim. My better half is Muslim. I'm Catholic. Our 2 older children from earlier chapters of our lives are Christian Orthodox. And the youngest, our 11-year-old boy, will decide for himself one day, but given his uncontainable excitement whenever he's told that we might make wishes at the Western Wall, the idea that he may one day choose to become Jewish is not completely far-fetched. And that would be fine with us. Just as it would be absolutely fine if he chose to be Muslim or to be Christian. Nevertheless, make no mistake, this small family portrait of ours is not a unique eccentricity. It is in truth a normal Albanian story. The same is true of our 4 traditional religious communities, which celebrate each other's important days, and of their leaders, who gather regularly, as they did, for example, to accompany President Herzog when he laid a wreath at our Holocaust memorial in Tirana during his historic visit, as the first ever Israeli head of state to land in Albania. It is a spirit forged across centuries of hardship, occupation, and poverty. It was this same spirit that brought Albanians of all faiths into the streets to welcome and greet Pope Francis when he visited our country, and with his captivating and saintly voice corrected the label we often use. "No," said the Holy Father, "yours is not religious tolerance, it is religious fraternity, because it rests not on patience, but on the quiet certainty that faith is not weakened by the presence of another faith, it is opened by it." To that spirit we owe with pride one of our highest moral honors. 73 Albanians of all faiths, recognized as righteous among the nations, whose memory shines within the walls of human dignity at Yad Vashem. And with the same pride, we'll soon open our first museum dedicated to the protection and salvation of Jews in the city of Vlora, Albania's largest medieval city, where, guess what, in the 16th century, Jews fleeing persecution in the West made up more than half of its own population. Our young people and the many guests who come from all over the world to visit our beautiful country, where the number of Israeli tourists, by the way, last year grew far faster than from any other nation, will see there with their own eyes and hear with their own ears how small Albania was always a safe refuge for Jews long before our era, and how ordinary Albanians made that very small place the only country on Europe's map to emerge from the Second World War with more Jews than it had when it entered the war. No one else in Europe can claim such a historical clean sheet, with not a single Jew, not one, handed over to the Nazis. And no one better than Albania can bear witness to a simple truth, that being Muslim and being anti-Semitic are not bound together by faith in God, by God's most abhorrent betrayal. And no greater honor and heavier responsibility than to bear witness to this truth here, in the heart of Israel, at a moment when the heartbreaking war in Gaza, through the unbearable suffering of innocent families, both Israeli and Palestinian, has opened a new window of opportunity for peace-building efforts to succeed. There is no doubt that part of this great honor for me is to come here a few days after the Albanian parliament ratified the decision to join President Trump in his efforts for peace and conflict resolution, and to make Albania a founding member of his Board of Peace, humbly contributing to the monumental task of turning that new window of opportunity into a new horizon of hope and prosperity for the people of Gaza and for the region. Now, allow me to take you with me for a moment far from Jerusalem, to the center of our capital city, Tirana. There is a tunnel beneath its heart. It was built to torture the so-called enemies of the people and ultimately to withstand an attack from the United States or the Soviet Union, a paranoia poured into concrete by a regime that feared every light of freedom and held its own people hostage in an open-air prison. This vivid memory has always made me feel sorry for respected and well-meaning international public figures or associations who rightly describe Gaza as an open-air prison, but failed to identify the true jailer of the people of Gaza. They mistook the finger for what the finger it was pointing at, and in doing so, they failed to recognize that the jailer of Gaza is Hamas, no one else but Hamas. Its ideology of terror against its own people, first and foremost, and toward the Jewish nation. Its totalitarian dogma that no Palestinian life is worth living until the state of Israel is annihilated and the last Jew is wiped out from the Holy Land. Therefore, until Hamas is fully dismantled, its 2 million prisoners will never be truly free, and no peace can endure. Today, that tunnel in Tirana has been transformed into a space dedicated to the victims of those who originally constructed the tunnel. And I wish with all my heart that a few of the countless tunnels of terror Hamas built, where the hostages taken on 7th of October were killed, raped, tortured, and reduced to 21st century human replicas of the prisoners in Nazi Germany extermination camps, will be preserved as part of the Gaza reconstruction plan and later as defining testimony in favor of lasting peace among the two future states. They should stand as tunnels of collective memory and healing, where both the hellish suffering of the hostages and the enormous loss of Palestinian lives were converted into the most horrifying defense system ever built by the human evil minds, raw material whose bricks were human bodies may serve as eternally lit candles of forgiveness without forgetting, and as a permanent call to all that for such horrors to never happen again, the roots of the cause should be cleaned. As you descend the stairs of the Tirana tunnel, a sentence in neon light by Primo Levi watches over you. Those who forget their past are condemned to relive it. We engraved this very familiar name in light on the wall, and I invoke him here not to create any impossible parallel between the industrial extermination of the Jewish people, an unparalleled crime in the history of humanity, and the tragic suffering inflicted by our brutal communist regime on countless innocent Albanians branded enemies of the people. No, I bring Primo Levi together with our own tunnel of memory to reassure you that we Albanians know the pain of history's grave wounds, and to reassure those who hold a very different view from mine about Gaza as an open-air prison, that we Albanians learned, in ways difficult to imagine for them, what happens when ideology becomes a god, when the state becomes an altar, and when people become or sheep to be exploited or individuals striped of their humanity in order to instill fear among the overall population. There is a profound history that binds our peoples together. The culminating chapter, of course, is the dark time of the Holocaust, but our shared legacy stretches back centuries. Jews arriving on our shores after the destruction of the temple, Sephardim fleeing the Reconquista, families seeking refuge in our land again and again, whenever Europe descended once more into one of its oldest and darkest impulses, hatred of Jews. In the 30s, a Jewish American sent to Europe as part of an observing mission, Leo Eaton, wrote in a report submitted to the United States Congress that Albania stood apart in Europe, a country documented as a potential refuge for Jews fleeing Central and Eastern Europe. He noted that Albania's religious plurality functioned practically, not symbolically. Muslims, Orthodox Christians, Catholics and Jews lived within a framework where religion did not determine civil trust. And Albania, he underlined, could be considered as a place suitable for Jewish settlement and refuge where no legal or social barriers existed to Jewish life. Precisely in those years, before the war, while anti-Semitism was rising across Europe, Albania went so far as to recognize the observance of Shabbat as a human right of the Jewish community, becoming a standalone country in our part of the world to legally bind both public and private employers to respect it. And during the Holocaust, when the Nazi envoy, Hermann Neubacher, demanded lists of Jews and their gold, our representatives replied with a sentence that deserves to be carved in stone: "You can have the gold, not the Jews." The gold was theirs to take. The Jews were ours to protect. That is not legend. That is Albania, where Jews were not hidden from society, but they were hidden by society. And if you want the explanation of this miracle, you do not need a political theory or a rabbi. Although I know rabbis can explain the most difficult things with the simplest words and can even foresee miracles. No, you need only one sentence from our first written law, the medieval Code of Honor. The house of the Albanian belongs to God and the guest. Not the guest you invite, of course, him too, but the guest who knocks on your door, the stranger who needs help. And betraying that guest in our code is the most unforgivable crime. It stains your reputation with shame and punishes all your family with exclusion from the life of the community. So, better to die than give up your guest. And since Jews happen to be Albania's guests, when the most fearsome machinery of death humanity had ever created reached our land, for Albanians, and first and foremost for Muslim Albanians, who then formed an overwhelming majority, the choice was cruelly simple. We would rather die than give up our Jews. Thank you. Thank you. This luminous chapter of Albanian history carries a message of pressing relevance for today's world Today's world that must be reminded again and again of what Hannah Arendt taught us with ruthless clarity. Evil is often not demonic or spectacular, but ordinary, at the risk of being it. Evil, it is simply banal. The tragedy of the Holocaust was not only the cruelty of a few, it was the passivity of the many. But in one small country, our country, the opposite happened. Our people were poor, they lacked power, they had no army or any strategic border, but they possessed something infinitely more precious. For that moment in history, the ability to see a human face and recognize a moral obligation. When others delivered their Jews neighbors to the authorities, Albanians delivered them to safety. When obedience became the silent ally of evil, our grandparents chose the perilous path of responsibility. And in doing so, they kept just that tiny corner of Europe human, at a time when humanity itself was disappearing day after day. This story is not an ornament displayed to impress others. It is a compass we must follow if we wish to remain worthy of the gift of life granted to us by the same God, and to make something worthy of that gift on this earth, so that our children and their children will not suffer tomorrow because of what we lack the courage to face today or fail to learn from yesterday. This is why Albania was among the first countries in Europe to pass new advanced legislation against anti-Semitism, why we have integrated Holocaust education into our school curricula, and why we are building now in Europe, in the middle of Europe, two particular cultural spaces inspired by the gravitational force of the shining examples set by our Muslim and Christian grandparents, who risked their lives to save Jewish lives. But this is not only about Jews. This is about humanity. And not humanity as a generic word, but our humanity. This is why for many years now, Albania has offered protection to several thousand Iranian citizens, whose opposition to the butchers of Tehran placed their lives in grave danger. It was not without risk for us, and it's not without risk today. To remain human when one's humanity is under pressure is never without danger. On the contrary. And because we took that risk, some years ago Albania suffered a massive cyber attack directed from Iran aimed at destroying our entire digital public infrastructure. We resisted it, they did not prevail. And I want to tell you, we were told by powerful friends not to overreact to Iran because they are big and they are dangerous. But we gave Iranian embassy personnel only 24 hours to leave the country and cut even the very thin hair of connection we had with the Khomeiniist Republic, which I'll never describe as Islamic, because Islam is love and humility. Khomeinism is hate and death. And it's not written here, but I want to simply do what Bibi does all the time, get out of my written speech and say the following. A Greek friend of ours, whose husband is Iranian, told us that some days ago in a market in Tehran, people were inside and fire was put while the market was surrounded by the assassins. So people had two choices. One choice, or to be burned by the flames inside the market, or to be killed at the doors of the market. But my question here is this: how is possible that while the global media talks about 30,000 people killed in 3 days, there is no gathering in any square in Europe against the Ayatollahs and to call for the end of that regime? It's a question that is not for you to answer, of course. You know the answer. And as we offered protection to those targeted by the mullahs of Tehran, Albania also became a sanctuary for several other thousand people targeted by the mullahs of Kabul during the chaos created by the disorderly withdrawal of coalition forces from Afghanistan, when many others, larger and wealthier, turned their back after having been there, after having promised to those people freedom, democracy, rights for all, and after having had them wash their cars, drive their cars, clean their houses. They just disappeared. Perhaps because the best and the brightest of Kabul society were not white enough, or were too Muslim for them. But we were blessed to engage in the most extraordinary network of solidarity I've ever seen. Finance, logistics, connections were assembled overseas like a hurricane. And it was not the US government that organized it. It was American citizens from every walk of life and from across political divides who mobilized their humanity to save lives through an astonishing chain of hands, forming a triangle between the United States, Albania, and Qatar, where the Qatari foreign minister at the time, today's Prime Minister Mohammed bin Abdulrahman, became a kind of control tower of hope and turned Doha Airport into an escape route toward life for thousands of people who were welcomed with compassion to Albania. Let me assure you that I'm not here, God forbid, to lecture anyone. Not only because small countries like mine do not lecture but are lectured all the time, but also because I believe that those who lecture Israel from afar run a very serious risk of being not simply unfair, but being fundamentally unjust. Nevertheless, I strongly believe that seeking peace is never about how bad or unreliable the other side has been, but about how faithful one chooses to remain to one's own values. The stunning peace agreement between Israel and the UAE, in which a one-of-a-kind world leader such as Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed broke with long ages of conflict and destruction and taught the world by example that if we remember that God is on our side, but also on the other side, and we are brave enough to realize that under heaven's eye, we are all on the same side of peace, then peace is not merely a possible path toward the future. It is the only possible avenue of the future. More than that, I firmly believe that what makes this new window of opportunity unique is the Florence moment of the Middle East. What is happening in your neighborhood resembles, in my eyes, what occurred in Europe when visionary leadership, inspired by modernity and beauty, turned Florence into the cradle of the Renaissance. Israel is no longer alone in seeking transformation, innovation, and global leadership for the future in this part of the world. From the streets of Riyadh to the green oasis of Abu Dhabi and the vibrant waterfronts of Doha, one can feel a mesmerizing wind of change that has little to do with the old caricature of the gilded spectacle in the desert. Saudi Arabia, under his driven and visionary young leader, whose traits recall Lorenzo the Magnificent of Florence, is changing at breathtaking speed. The UAE has placed itself at the forefront of global leadership on the green agenda and social responsibility beyond borders, beyond languages, beyond color of skin. While Qatar, led for over a decade by its young and far-sighted Emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, has made an extraordinary leap onto the world stage. And thanks also to a role model woman, his sister, Sheikha Mayasa, is becoming a major laboratory for next generation of urban and lifestyle transformation. Today's common denominator among your Arab neighbors is a drive to modernize in every direction and to beautify at every step. And together, frankly, they are making Europe's old and marvelous playground look suddenly grim and dim. Now, there is a question that arises stubbornly in front of this. How can possibly this extraordinary story of a bright future being written with unleashed power of hopes and dream in the desert coexist with the great open wound of conflict that has inflicted such prolonged suffering and destruction? A wound that still lies close by at the heart of the Middle East like a trap capable of swallowing in its dark gut every dream of greatness being built around this region. It's not possible. There is no chance to sustain both for long. So I very much wish that the Abrahamic Accords will continue. And I wish that perhaps by looking at the bloody past through the eyes of a brighter future, rather than the other way around, this region as a whole, as the UAE and a few others already have, will reveal not only that peace is possible, but that peace can lift all peacemaking nations almost as a miracle within the realm of the Abrahamic faiths. Albania could not feel more blessed than to count both Israel and the Arab countries among its close friends. And Turkey too, by the way. We seek to deepen these relations, and we stand firm in our readiness to participate, together with Arab brothers and Turkish brothers and others, in the forthcoming international stabilization force in Gaza. Mr. Speaker, you know, because you chair here, that Jews speak long, but you didn't know that Balkan guys speak longer. I promise that the generous time you allowed me to occupy this very special place is drawing to an end. And as I opened with the words of an Arab martyr for peace, with the words, I want to close with the words of a Jewish martyr for peace, Prime Minister Isaac Rabin of Israel. May his memory be a blessing. Spoken to Israelis and Palestinians precisely 30 years ago from this very place where I stand today. From the depths of our hearts, we call upon all citizens of the State of Israel, certainly those who live in Judea, Samaria, and the Gaza Strip, as well as Palestinian residents, to give the establishment of peace a chance, to give an end to acts of hostility, to give another life a chance, a new life. We appeal to Jews and Palestinians alike to act with restraint, to preserve human dignity, to behave in a fitting manner, and to live in peace and security. We are embarking upon a new path which could lead us to an era of peace, to the end of wars. Amen.
Amen.
May the memory of those who perished be a blessing. May the courage of those who refuse to comply remain a compass. May the state of Israel flourish and be safe for eternity. May Palestinians be free and live with dignity in their own state. And may our two small nations, immense in spirit, remain bound not only by history, but by shared commitment to keep humanity human. Toda Rabba.
תודה רבה לראש ממשלת אלבניה. Thank you, Prime Minister of Albania, the Honorable Edi Rama.
כבוד יושב ראש הכנסת וכבוד ראש ממשלת אלבניה. נא לשבת.
אנחנו ממשיכים בסדר היום. תודה רבה לכולם. אני מבקש לשבת. חברות וחברי הכנסת, אנו ממשיכים בסדר היום. הודעה למזכיר הכנסת, בבקשה.
תודה. ברשות יושב ראש הישיבה אני מתכבד להודיעכם כי הונחו היום על שולחן הכנסת הצעות חוק לדיון מוקדם, החל מהצעת חוק שמספרה פ/6484/25 ועד להצעת חוק שמספרה פ/6515/25. עוד הונחו לקריאה שנייה ולקריאה שלישית מטעם הממשלה הצעת חוק לתיקון ולהארכת תוקפן של תקנות שעת חירום חרבות ברזל (הארכת מעצר לחשוד בעבירת ביטחון) (תיקון מס' 8), התשפ"ו 2026, וכן הצעת חוק לתיקון ולהארכת תוקפן של תקנות שעת חירום חרבות ברזל (פגישה עם עורך דין של עצור בעבירת ביטחון) (תיקון מס' 7), התשפ"ו 2026, שהחזירה ועדת החוקה, חוק ומשפט. כמו כן, הונחו על שולחן הכנסת לקריאה ראשונה מטעם הכנסת הצעת חוק זכויות הסטודנט (תיקון מס' 11), תנאים והגבלות להפסקת לימודים של סטודנט המשרת במילואים והרחבת תחולה, התשפ"ו 2026, של חבר הכנסת מיכאל מרדכי ביטון, והצעת חוק עובדים זרים (תיקון מס' 25), חובת בדיקה של רישיון עובד זר, התשפ"ו 2026, של חברי הכנסת אליהו רביבו, יבגני סובה וקבוצת חברי כנסת. כמו כן, הונח על שולחן הכנסת לוח תיקונים להצעת חוק משפחות חיילים שנספו במערכה, תגמולים ושיקום, תיקון מס' 47, התשפ"ו 2026. בנוסף, הונח על שולחן הכנסת הסכם מסגרת לשיתוף פעולה כללי בין ממשלת מדינת ישראל לממשלת הרפובליקה של דרום סודאן. עוד הונח על שולחן הכנסת תשובות שר החינוך למסקנות הוועדות הבאות. מסקנות ועדת החינוך, התרבות והספורט בעקבות דיון מהיר בנושא הנגשת מסגרות החינוך לסטודנטים עם נכויות שקופות לאור אתגרי התקופה והמלחמה, של חברי הכנסת מיכל מרים וולדיגר, משה טור פז ויבגני סובה, וכן מסקנות הוועדה המיוחדת לזכויות הילד בעקבות דיון מהיר בנושא היעדר מדיניות ונהלים במערכת החינוך לטיפול בילדים החיים לצד הורי הלום קרב או נכי צה"ל, של חברי הכנסת מיכאל מרדכי ביטון, יצחק קרויזר, עופר כסיף, שרון ניר, אביחי אברהם בוארון ומאיר כהן. לבסוף הודיעכם כי הונח על שולחן הכנסת, הונחו היום על שולחן הכנסת מסקנות ועדת הכלכלה בעקבות דיון מהיר בנושא אי יישום החלטת הממשלה בעניין התחרות בתחבורה ציבורית, של חברי הכנסת יעקב אשר, יוראי להב הרצנו, עופר כסיף, ואליד אלהואשלה ויבגני סובה. תודה.
תודה רבה, אדוני. אם כן, הנושא הבא על סדר היום, הצעות להבעת אי אמון בממשלה. אני מזמין את חברת הכנסת מירב בן ארי לנמק את ההצעה מטעם סיעת יש עתיד. בבקשה גברתי, ומהרגע שתתחילי לדבר 10 דקות לרשותך.
תודה רבה, אדוני היושב בראש, כנסת נכבדה. לפני שאתחיל את האי-אמון שלי, אני דבר ראשון כמובן רוצה להתייחס לשובו של גיבור ישראל רן גבילי, זיכרונו לברכה, שחזר היום לקבורה במדינת ישראל, המדינה שכל כך אהב ונלחם למענה. מי השר? הנה הוא נכנס. אני רוצה להגיד כמה מילים על רני. לפני הכל, רני גבילי חלם להיות לוחם ושוטר כבר מגיל צעיר. הוא התגייס כחייל לגולני ונפצע במהלך השירות שלו בתאונת אימונים ושבר את עצם הירך. הרופאים אמרו למשפחתו שעליו להשלים עם כך שלעולם לא יוכל לחזור להילחם, אבל רני סירב לקבל את זה, וכשהתעורר מהניתוח אמר לרופא, תוך 4 חודשים אני חוזר למקום שממנו הפסקתי, והוא אכן חזר. לאחר השחרור שלו רני גויס ליס"מ. זה ממש מפריע לי, מאיר. אני מדברת על רני גבילי. מי שלא מתאים לו שיצא החוצה.
אני מבקש.
מה זה הדבר הזה? תעצור לי את הזמן.
את הערת.
יכול לעצור לי את הזמן אבל?
כן, אני אעצור לך את הזמן.
זה לא מתאים.
השר קיש וגואטה וכל האנשים שם, שקט, זה מפריע, ומדברים על החלל שהחזרנו. בבקשה, נוסיף לך עוד דקה.
תודה רבה. לאחר שרני השתחרר, הוא התגייס ליס"מ, ובבוקר 7 לאוקטובר היה עם ההורים שלו ביישוב מיתר, כשהוא מחלים מפציעה נוספת, שבר בכתף. למרות השבר, הוא קם, לבש מדים ויצא. וכששאלו את רני, לאן אתה הולך? הוא אמר, נראה לכם שאני אשאר בבית כשאני יודע שהחברים שלי נלחמים? אין מצב כזה. במהלך הלחימה בצומת אלומים הוא הוביל את הכוח, הוא היה קר רוח, חד, נתן פקודות ותמיד ראשון. כשהגיע רכב המחבלים הוא פתח באש והסתער, ועם קצין נוסף יצא למרדף. שניהם נקלעו למערב, נלחמו ועצרו מחבלים רבים מלטבוח באנשי קיבוץ אלומים. בהקלטת הקשר האחרונה של רני הוא נשמע אומר, אני לא יכול להרים את הראש, אני מקבל אש, התחמושת אוזלת. בשעה 10:39 התקבל ממנו הקשר האחרון. לאחר 117 ימים הודיעו להוריו שרני אינו בין החיים. חברים שלו מספרים על גיבור, לוחם עז, אח גדול ונכס לאומי. רני היה הראשון לצאת מהבית ב7 לאוקטובר כדי להגן ולהציל את אזרחי המדינה. הוא נפל כלוחם, והיום הוא שב לישראל סמל של גבורה, אחריות וערבות הדדית. כמו שאימא שלו אמרה, הראשון לצאת, האחרון לחזור. בשמי, בשם כל הכנסת, אני שולחת תנחומים למשפחה שלו, להורים איציק וטלי, ולאחים עמרי ושירה. יהיה זכרו של רני ברוך. וכעת ברשותכם אני אעבור לנושא של האי-אמון, שעוסק כמובן בהשתמטות. היום היינו אמורים להצביע כאן על קריאה ראשונה על התקציב. נערכנו, חברי הכנסת נערכו, בוטלו נסיעות, בוטלו משלחות, כולם הגיעו, כי בכל זאת יש קומבינה של חוק השתמטות עם חוק גיוס. אממה, אין חוק תקציב, וכשאין אין חוק גיוס, וכשאין חוק גיוס אז התקציב יחכה. כל הקומבינה הזאת של להביא ולכרוך את תקציב מדינת ישראל עם הגיוס, זה מה שקרה היום. עשרות חברי כנסת הגיעו, שרים, כולם ביטלו את הלוז ותכננו להצביע לתקציב. אבל אנחנו כולנו בני ערובה, כי לא יהיה תקציב בלי חוק השתמטות. עכשיו, הקומבינה הזאת באמת פשוט מסריחה, אין לי מילה אחרת, גרמה עכשיו לעיכוב. עכשיו יש חוק יסוד משק המדינה, צריך 60 יום, הכל בסדר, קודם כל צריך לתפור את הקומבינה. עכשיו, לא משנה שבכלל אצל הרבנים זה בכלל לא מדברים על גיוס, ואני רוצה לצטט לכם את הרב דוב לנדאו שהוקלט ואומר ככה, מה זה השאלה? ללכת לצבא? מה אתה רוצה? אף אחד לא רוצה שבני ישיבות ילכו לצבא, אף אחד לא רוצה. מה שעושים בכנסת זה הצלה זמנית, מפני שאם לא יהיה יותר גרוע. מה שמדברים בכנסת זה שטויות, לא יהיה. אנחנו לא נלך לצבא, אף אחד לא ילך לצבא. קומבינה מספר 1. וכעת לרב משה הלל הירש, קומבינה מספר 2. לציבור שלנו אין מסגרות, חס וחלילה שנמלא יעדים. אף אחד לא ימלא יעדים. בסוף החוק ייפול אחרי כמה שנים, אבל הרווחנו שנים. מה יש עוד לומר ששני הרבנים הראשיים, הרב דוב לנדאו והרב משה הלל הירש, שמובילים קהילות שלמות, לוחמים פוטנציאליים כנראה לא, אומרים בצורה מאוד ברורה, הכל קומבינה, אף אחד לא יתגייס, אף אחד גם ככה, למה? כי סתם אנחנו מעבירים פה את הזמן. עכשיו אני אומרת לעצמי, וואלה, הוא צודק, זה מה שהוא רוצה, מותר לו, הוא רב, הוא לא רוצה שבני הישיבות יתגייסו. מה שאני לא מצליחה להבין, למה הקואליציה נופלת בפח הזה? למה אף אחד לא מדבר על זה שאין גיוס? מילא כשאתם יושבים בוועדת חוץ וביטחון ומספרים לעצמכם סיפורים, אבל הנה, הוא אומר, מה שמדברים זה שטויות, ואף אחד לא יתגייס. אז למה הוועדה הזאת של חוץ וביטחון נמשכת? אני לא יודעת. עכשיו, מה שמדהים זה שביבי, ממש לפני שבועיים, ראש הממשלה, צריך לומר, אמר בדיון 40 חתימות, אנחנו מקדמים מתווה היסטורי, מתווה שיביא לגיוס של 23,000 חרדים. ב3.5 השנים הקרובות מדובר כאן במהפכה אמיתית שלא הייתה מאז הקמת המדינה, עם מספר עצום של מתגייסים, והדבר יקל מאוד על משרתי המילואים. עכשיו, אני לא מצליחה להבין, כאילו אומרים לך הרבנים האלה שלא התגייסו. אתה עומד במליאת הכנסת, מישיר מבט לחברי הקואליציה והאופוזיציה, ואומר שאתה תגייס אלפי. איך זה מתחבר? איך זה מתחבר? שקר? כנראה. כי הרי רק בשבוע שעבר הוא עלה במליאה ואמר שהוא היחיד שהלך למבקר המדינה. מסתבר שכל ראשי מערכות הביטחון הלכו. עכשיו באמת תראו, מילא שראש הממשלה משקר, כבר התרגלנו. אבל איפה כולם? לאף אחד לא אכפת מהקומבינה המסריחה הזאת? לאף אחד לא אכפת שכל תקציב המדינה מחכה לראות אם יש השתמטות או לא? אתה חבר כנסת רציני, אלי דלל, לא מפריע לך שעומדים רבנים ואומרים אף אחד לא יתגייס? איך אפשר ביד אחת לתת חקיקה לאנשי מילואים, וראיתי יש לו הטבות ונופשים, ומה הוא לא מביא? ומצד שני לירוק להם בפרצוף ולשלוח להם עוד צו ועוד 300 ימים ועוד 40 ימים. לא מבינים שהמילואימניקים האלה, המסכנים האלה, כבר איבדו את העסק, חלקם איבדו את המשפחה, חלקם פוסט-טראומטיים. מה יעזור שתזרוק עליהם עוד נופש ועוד נופש, אם בסוף הוא צריך עוד אנשים שיחליפו אותו? מה רוצה המילואימניק בסוף? אתה יודע מה הוא רוצה? שיחליפו אותו, שיחליפו אותו. אתה יודע, אני אספר לך לקראת סיום, ביום שישי היה לי שיחה עם אחיין שלי, שהוא בצו 8 מהיום שהוא השתחרר.
חשבתי לך דקה.
תודה. הוא 1.5 שנה בצו 8, בעיקרון בעולם תקין, הוא היה משתחרר, תסלחו, מתחיל לימודים. סבבה, כמו כל זה. עכשיו הוא אמר לי, מירב, אני בהתלבטות, כי מצד אחד הצבא צריך אותי, ואני יודע שהוא צריך אותי כי יש לו התמחות מסוימת, והוא תומך לחימה. מצד שני, מתי שהוא אמור להתחיל את החיים שלו? מתישהו, אז מה יעזור, תגיד לי, שהוא יקבל עוד נופש, ועוד קופון, ועוד קופון? בסוף הוא צריך להתחיל את החיים. ואיפה אנשי המילואים שיש להם משפחות וילדים? מה איתם? איך אפשר באמת להמשיך ולירוק בפרצוף של אנשי המילואים ולקדם כאן השתמטות, כשהרבנים בעצמם אומרים, ובזה אני מסיימת, אומרים בעצמם שמה שאומרים בכנסת זה שטויות ושאף אחד לא יתגייס. והעובדה שאתם שותקים ואף אחד מכם לא אומר, עובדים עלינו בעיניים, באמת אני לא יודעת מה עוד צריך לקרות כדי שתבינו שבחוק הזה אף אחד, אבל אף אחד לא יתגייס, ואותם אנשי מילואים ימשיכו לשאת בנטל בשביל כולנו. תודה רבה.
תודה רבה, גברתי. אני מזמין את חבר הכנסת חמד עמאר. השר משיב משולב, כן? בבקשה. חבר הכנסת חמד עמאר ינמק את ההצעה מטעם סיעת ישראל ביתנו, העבודה וכחול לבן, המחנה הממלכתי.
כבוד היושב-ראש,